Hello everyone, this is Harris Trivia, and today we're continuing the Conquest of Shuhan Let's Talk Lore series with episode 8, titled Jiang Wei's Last Plot. Before we get started, here's the answer to our trivia question from the end of our last episode, and be sure to stay tuned until the end of this episode for a brand new trivia question. Now, last time we left off as Liu Shan, the second emperor of Shuhan, decided to close the curtain on his own kingdom by preemptively surrendering to Deng Ai. A delegation of Chengdu, the minister that headed the surrender faction within the imperial court, along with imperial attendant Zhang Zhou and imperial carriage captain Deng Liang, was given the Shuhan imperial seal to represent the will of Emperor Liu Shan. The Shuhan delegation would bump into Deng Ai's approaching army at Luo County in between Mianzhu and Chengdu, where the surrender documents were presented to a surprised Deng Ai, who immediately accepted the Shuhan surrender on behalf of the Kingdom of Wei. Deng Ai would write a return letter to officially accept the surrender, as Zhang Zhou and Deng Liang were sent back to Chengdu to share the news, while Chengdu would remain behind to accompany Deng Ai's march to Chengdu. Soon, Deng Ai's forces would arrive outside the north gate of Chengdu, where Liu Shan was waiting for him along with the rest of the former Shuhan imperial court. To signify his surrender, Liu Shan had himself tied up as a prisoner and even brought a coffin to show that he was ready to sacrifice himself if necessary to bring mercy to the rest of his former kingdom. Knowing that the Wei policy was to show mercy as a mean to further weaken Wu's resistance in the future, Deng Ai generously accepted Liu Shan's surrender, as he would untie Liu Shan himself before burning the coffin to signify that no one would need to die. Liu Shan would be temporarily given a general of the cavalry title, while his remaining sons would all be given captain titles, and before further instruction would arrive from the Wei court in Luoyang, Deng Ai allowed Liu Shan to continue to reside in the Shuhan palace. Most importantly, Deng Ai had Liu Shan send out envoys to all the remaining Shuhan forces throughout the former kingdom to inform them of the official surrender and to command them to stand down and surrender to the nearest Wei forces. This naturally included Jiang Wei and the bulk of the remaining Shuhan army at Jiange. The only thing is, at the time, Jiang Wei was no longer at Jiange. As you see, when news of Mianzhu's fall first reached Jiang Wei and the rest of the Jiange defenders, Jiang Wei knew that continued resistance at Jiange would become pointless, as the presence of Deng Ai's army on their rear threatened their supply line. So after a tough discussion with his fellow generals, a decision was reached to abandon the Jiange gate and to retreat east towards Bazhong, where Jiang Wei hoped to at least keep their remaining troops that still numbered almost 50,000 alive and ready to continue the resistance until more news from Chengdu could reach them. This, of course, meant allowing Zhong Hui and the entire Wei army free access to the Shuhan heartland, but with Deng Ai's successful takeover of Mianzhu, there was just no better option. For Zhong Hui, the news of Jiang Wei's sudden retreat east implied Deng Ai's success, even though at the time there was still no news of the result of Deng Ai's hike. To play it safe, Zhong Hui would send generals Hu Lie, Tian Xu, and Pang Hui to lead a detachment east to pursue and monitor Jiang Wei's troops, while he would personally lead the main army forward to Fu County in order to find out the result of Deng Ai's hike and the situation inside Shuhan. But before any of these forces would get far from Jiange Gate, envoys from Liu Shan would reach all parties, as news of Shuhan's surrender would surprise everyone. Zhong Hui would halt and garrison his army at Fu County, while Jiang Wei, after recovering from the initial shock, decided to respect his former emperor's decision, as he would also halt the Shuhan army's retreat east and instead brought them back to Zhong Hui, where he would formally surrender as well. While this would have been the perfect ending to the conquest of Shuhan, the personal ambitions of Zhong Hui and Deng Ai, as well as Jiang Wei's desperate desire to salvage the situation, would end up creating a drama that would leave a lasting impact on the history of the Three Kingdoms. First off, starting off with the hero of the campaign, Deng Ai. After achieving a feat that would surely leave a mark in history, Deng Ai's ego ballooned drastically, especially as former Shuhan officials buttered up to him with praises and bribes inside Chengdu, as everyone hoped to leverage a close relationship with Deng Ai into a new promising future career within the Wei court. Furthermore, during Liu Shan's surrender, Deng Ai made remarks referencing to two historical famous generals during the founding of the Eastern Han dynasty in generals Deng Yu and Wu Han. Deng Ai first compared himself to Deng Yu, who famously granted surrendered officials new titles after retaking the former Western Han capital city of Chang'an. And most importantly, at the time, Deng Yu called himself a representation of the Son of Heaven, or the Emperor himself. So Deng Ai's reference here can be misconstrued to mean that he also saw himself as a representation of the Son of Heaven, which would be a big overstep. Then right after the surrender of Chengdu, Deng Ai was cited to have frequently bragged to the former Shuhan officials that they were lucky that he was not like Wu Han, the other Eastern Han general, who historically reclaimed Chengdu for the Eastern Han. And more importantly, Wu Han famously razed and looted the city clean after that conquest. So Deng Ai was more or less boasting about his own benevolence, while subtly threatening the former Shuhan officials to hand over their valuables willingly. In both cases, Deng Ai's actions would spark outrage within the Wei imperial court, especially as his reports back to the court would end up getting modified by Zhong Hui, who had other plans after the conquest of Shuhan. Now, Zhong Hui's story is a bit more complex. He was the youngest son of the famous court official, respected Confucian scholar, and most importantly, renowned calligrapher Zhong Yao. This meant that Zhong Hui grew up receiving calligraphy training that eventually made him a skilled forger of other people's handwriting. And with Zhong Hui remaining at Fu County, all the letters coming from and going to Chengdu would end up on his table first. And in Zhong Hui's heart, he always saw himself as the protagonist, and the conquest of Shuhan should have been his statement military achievement that would grant him the prestige needed to challenge Sima Zhao and the Sima clan for the right to control the Wei court. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to Zhong Hui's plans, as Shuhan would be conquered in a campaign that was led by himself. Deng Ai ended up stealing all the glory first with his impossible hike through the mountain before single-handedly ending the campaign by forcing Liu Shan's surrender. So to recover from this, Zhong Hui decided to rewrite the narrative, both figuratively and literally, as he would make alterations to both letters from Deng Ai back to the Wei imperial court and the replies from the imperial court to Deng Ai, in an effort to frame Deng Ai as an arrogant, overly ambitious usurper. And all while this was happening, Jiang Wei started to pick up on Zhong Hui's personal ambition. So he also formulated a plot of his own as he would spend his time serving under Zhong Hui after the surrender, goading Zhong Hui's already overinflated ego to make that final step in declaring himself as the emperor inside Shuhan. In a letter that Jiang Wei would write to the former emperor Liu Shan, we will learn that Jiang Wei's ultimate plan was to have Zhong Hui first remove Deng Ai from power in Chengdu. Then when Zhong Hui tries to gain control of the entire Wei army, by imprisoning the rest of the Wei generals and officers, as most of them would not support Zhong Hui's emperorship. Jiang Wei would then lead the surrendered Shu Han troops to attack the disorganized and divided Wei forces and ultimately repel them from Chengdu and the rest of the Shu land, leading to the restoration of Liu Shan's emperorship in a Shu Han revival. And to find out how Zhong Hui's plot against Deng Ai and the intertwining subsequent Jiang Wei's plot against Zhong Hui would play out, come back next time as we'll continue our series tomorrow with episode 9 titled Zhong Hui's Folly. Now, hopefully y'all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting the like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!